The sound that ended 37 years of silence was not a slap. It was a laugh. My daughter-in-law was standing in the doorway of my study, holding a glass of white wine, and she was laughing at me, not the polite, restrained laugh she used at dinner parties or charity events. This was the other one, the real one, the one that came out when she thought the doors were closed and the old man in the corner had finally stopped being useful. "Walter," she said, still smiling, "you honestly don't understand how any of this works, do you?" It wasn't a question. I had just asked her, calmly and clearly, why there was a wire transfer of $240,000 from my personal investment account to a holding company I had never heard of. I had asked politely. I had used her name. I had given her every opportunity in the world to give me a reasonable explanation. She laughed instead. "I want you to understand something before I tell you the rest of this story. I spent 40 years building Mercer Design Group from a one-man drafting table in a rented office above a laundromat in Aurora, Illinois, into one of the most respected architectural firms in the Midwest. I designed hospitals where children were born and schools where they learned to read. I drew the plans for a veterans memorial that still stands on the south side of Chicago. And on the day they unveiled it, 3 men in wheelchairs came up to me and shook my hand and didn't say anything at all, and that silence was worth more to me than every dollar I ever made. I say all of that not to brag. I say it so you understand what it means when I tell you that my daughter-in-law laughed at me in my own study, in the house I designed myself, surrounded by the blueprints of my life. And I say it so you understand what I did next. I put down my reading glasses. I folded my hands on the desk, and I said, very quietly, "You're right. I probably don't understand." She topped off her wine and walked away. That was the moment. Not the moment I planned it. The planning had started weeks earlier, when I first noticed the discrepancy. But that was the moment I stopped hoping I was wrong. If you have ever built something real with your hands, a business, a home, a family, and then watched someone treat it like a hotel room they were about to trash and walk out of, this story is for you. Please hit the like button and subscribe to Revenge Chronicles. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And stay with me, because what happened 4 days later at my son's company anniversary gala? I need to go back. My son and I had always been close. At least, I thought we had. He was 39 years old, tall, with his mother's eyes and my stubbornness. And for the first 15 years of his adult life, I had watched him grow into someone I was genuinely proud of. He worked hard. He built relationships. When I transferred the majority share of Mercer Design Group to him 3 years ago, he had earned it. I was 67. I wanted to step back. I wanted to travel, to sleep past 6 in the morning for the first time in 4 decades, to teach my granddaughter how to read architectural blueprints the way my own father had taught me. My daughter-in-law came with the deal. She had been part of his life for 5 years by then, and I had tried. I want you to know that. I tried. Very hard. She was smart, polished, the kind of woman who walked into a room and immediately calculated the net worth of every person in it. She called me Walter from day one, never Dad, and I respected that. Some people aren't comfortable with that word. I understood. What I didn't understand, not until too late, was that she called me Walter because Dad implies obligation. And she had no interest in being obligated to anyone. The first sign came 6 months after I stepped back. My son mentioned, casually, over the phone, that they had restructured the firm's financial accounts for tax efficiency. I asked a few questions. He got evasive. I let it go. He was the CEO. These were his decisions now. I had made a promise to myself that I would step back and mean it. The second sign was quieter. My granddaughter, 9 years old, sharp as a finishing nail, with her father's stubbornness, and thankfully none of her mother's coldness, stopped coming on our Saturday mornings. We had a ritual, her and me. Every Saturday, I would pick her up, and we would go to the architecture museum downtown, or to a job site, if I had a consulting project. And I would show her how buildings worked, how a good foundation was everything, how you could read the character of a structure by looking at its bones. She loved it. She would ask questions that made me rethink things I had believed for decades. Then one Saturday she wasn't ready when I arrived. Her mother was there instead, explaining in that smooth, pleasant voice that my granddaughter had other commitments. The following Saturday, the same. On the third Saturday, I didn't even make it to the driveway. I got a text. The third sign was the wire transfer, $240,000, to a company called Lakeview Consulting Partners, LLC, registered in Nevada. I had found it while reviewing my quarterly statement, something I still did out of habit even though I was technically retired. The transfer had my authorization code on it. I had not authorized it. I did not confront her that night. I had spent 40 years in rooms full of developers and contractors and city planners who were all trying to take something from me. And I had learned one fundamental truth. You never show your hand before you've built your case. I called my accountant the next morning. I asked him to pull every transaction from the last 18 months across every account that bore my name. Then I called my attorney, a woman named Ruth, who had been practicing law in Chicago for 35 years and had the demeanor of a federal judge and the instincts of a bloodhound. "Don't touch anything," she said, after I explained the basics. "Don't move money. Don't confront anyone. Don't change passwords. Let me make some calls." I went to the Architecture Museum alone that Saturday. I stood in front of a cross-section model of a Mies van der Rohe building, and I thought about structure, about the difference between a building that looks solid and a building that is solid, about how the most dangerous collapses are the ones nobody sees coming because the facade is still standing long after the bones have rotted through. Ruth called me back on a Tuesday evening. "Walter," she said, and there was something in her voice I had not heard before. Ruth was not a woman who softened bad news. She delivered it like a diagnosis, clean and direct. The softness told me this was worse than I had imagined. "How bad?" I asked. "Sit down," she said, "and pour yourself something." I sat. I did not pour anything. I needed to be clear. Over the next 40 minutes, Ruth walked me through what her investigator had found. Lakeview Consulting Partners, LLC, had been incorporated 11 months ago. The registered agent was a law firm in Reno. The sole authorized signatory was my daughter-in-law. In the past 11 months, 3 transfers had been made from accounts associated with my estate planning documents. Accounts that I had not touched. Accounts I had essentially forgotten existed because they were set up as long-term instruments. The total moved $680,000. The authorization codes on each transfer matched a limited power of attorney document I had supposedly signed 14 months ago. I had not signed any such document. "The signature is good," Ruth said carefully. "Not perfect, but good. It would hold up to a casual examination, but not a forensic one," I said. "No," she said, "not a forensic one. There was more." The investigator had been looking into Mercer Design Group's current financials, which Ruth had been able to access through a contact at the firm's bank. The company I had spent 4 decades building was now carrying $3.2 million in debt. My son had refinanced the firm's assets twice in the past 18 months. The stated purpose was expansion capital. The actual expenditures were inconsistent with any expansion activity. "Walter," Ruth said, "there are also 2 first-class plane tickets purchased last month, one way. Departing O'Hare. Destination: Lisbon." The room was very quiet. "For when?" I asked. 3 weeks from now," she said. "The Friday after your son's anniversary gala." I set the phone down for a moment without hanging up. I looked at the framed photo on my desk, my wife. Gone, 11 years now. Standing in front of the first building we had ever designed together. A small community library in Naperville. She was laughing in the photo, her head thrown back, one hand shielding her eyes from the sun. She used to say that the most dangerous thing in the world was a patient man with a long memory. I picked up the phone. "Ruth," I said, "I need you to do 3 things. First, I need a full forensic analysis of that power of attorney. Second, I need everything you can find on those Lisbon tickets. And third, I need the name of whoever she's flying with." Ruth was quiet for exactly 3 seconds. "The second ticket," she said, is booked under the name Garrett Finch. I knew that name. Garrett Finch had tried to buy Mercer Design Group 8 years ago. I had turned him down flat. He had come back with a higher offer, and I had turned him down again. He ran a large regional firm that won contracts through relationships and retained them through corners cut cheaper materials, overextended timelines, the kind of work that looked fine for 5 years and then started showing cracks. 2 years ago, his firm had lost a lawsuit over a parking structure collapse in Rockford. Nobody was killed, but 12 cars were totaled, and the city was still litigating. I looked at my wife's photograph. "Thank you, Ruth," I said. "Get me everything." The gala was in 3 weeks. My son's firm, my firm, was celebrating its 40th anniversary. The original founding was mine. So technically the anniversary belonged to me, but my son had taken it over as a company milestone. A black tie event at the Palmer House with investors, clients, city officials, and the kind of press that helps a struggling firm look healthy from the outside. My daughter-in-law had organized the whole thing. She was very proud of it. I spent the next 12 days doing something I had not done since I was 28 years old. Hungry and broke and pouring everything I had into a company that didn't exist yet. I worked. I was at Ruth's office every morning at 8. I sat with the forensic accountant she brought in from a firm that handled federal cases. I reviewed every document, every transfer record, every line item. The power of attorney was a forgery. The forensic analyst was unambiguous about it. My actual signature, developed over 50 years of architectural drafting, has a specific characteristic in the way I complete the letter R. It curves back, almost doubling on itself, a habit I picked up from a left-handed professor in college who told me it made signatures harder to copy. The forgery missed it. Every single time. On the 8th day, Ruth brought in a contact from the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. His name was Special Agent Donahue. He was younger than I expected, with a quiet manner and the kind of eyes that made you feel like he had already finished reading you before you sat down. He listened to everything. He looked at the documents. He looked at the wire transfer records and the forensic analysis. He looked at the ticket information. "Mr. Mercer," he said, "what you're describing is wire fraud, identity theft, and unauthorized transfer of funds from accounts associated with a federally regulated institution. The forged power of attorney elevates this to aggravated identity fraud under federal statute." "I know what it is," I said. "I need to know if you can be somewhere 3 weeks from now." He looked at me for a long moment. "Tell me about this gala," he said. "Here is something I learned in 40 years of designing buildings. The most important element of any structure is not the material. It is not the engineering. It is the sequence. The order in which things are assembled determines everything. You cannot hang a roof before you have walls. You cannot pour a floor before you have a foundation. Every piece must come in the right order, or the whole thing fails." I spent 3 days planning the sequence. I drove to the Palmer House 2 weeks before the event and walked the ballroom. I noted the layout, the sight lines, the position of the podium. I confirmed the AV setup with the event coordinator. I told her I wanted to add a personal tribute to the evening's program, a slideshow of the firm's history, 40 years of projects, ending with a statement from the founder. She was delighted. She said it would be a wonderful surprise for my son. I agreed that it would be a surprise. On the Thursday before the gala, something happened that I did not plan and could not have anticipated. And it became the moment I think about most when I think about those weeks. I was in my study, reviewing the final version of the presentation Ruth had helped me prepare. The house was quiet. My son and daughter-in-law were at a dinner across town. My granddaughter was supposed to be at a friend's house. I heard the front door, small footsteps on the hardwood, a pause. Then she appeared in the doorway of my study, still wearing her coat, her backpack on one shoulder, her face serious in a way that 9-year-olds' faces shouldn't be serious. "Grandpa," she said, "why is Mom always on the phone with that man?" I turned my chair to face her. "What man, sweetheart?" She came into the room and sat on the edge of the leather chair across from my desk, the one where Ruth usually sat. She pulled her backpack off and set it on her lap like a shield. I don't know his name. She calls him G. She says things like, after the gala, and the accounts are ready. Last night she said she paused, as if deciding whether to repeat it. She said, the old man won't know until we're already gone. I held very still. She reached into her backpack and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She had drawn something on it, a building, rendered in careful colored pencil, with columns and wide steps, and a sign above the door that read, Mercer Design Group. Underneath the building she had written, in her careful block letters, don't let her take it, Grandpa. I know something is wrong. She pushed it across the desk toward me. I picked it up. I looked at it for a long time. The building was actually quite accurate. She had remembered the proportions, the window placement, the way the entrance canopy angled slightly toward the street. She had my eye for detail. How long have you known something was wrong? I asked. She looked at her hands. Since she stopped letting me come on Saturdays, I stood up and walked around the desk and crouched down in front of her, the way my knees no longer enjoyed but the moment required. I need you to listen to me very carefully, I said. I am not going anywhere. I am not going to lose what I built. And what you just told me, what you just gave me, that matters. That matters more than you know. She looked up at me. Her eyes were steady. Are you going to fix it? She asked. Yes, I said. How? I reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. With a very good slideshow, I said. She laughed. It was short and surprised, but it was real. The night of the gala arrived cold and clear. The kind of Chicago November evening, where the wind off the lake sharpens everything, and the city looks like it was designed to be seen at night. I arrived at the Palmer House at 6:15, 45 minutes before the guests. I was wearing the charcoal suit I kept for the occasions that mattered. I had my reading glasses. I had my phone, and in the inner pocket of my jacket, I had a folded piece of paper, a drawing of a building in colored pencil. I met Ruth in the lobby. She handed me a small earpiece. Donahue's team is already inside, she said quietly. 3 agents, plain clothes. The federal prosecutor is at table 7. The AV presentation is loaded and ready. When you want to run it, just signal the coordinator. She paused. How are you feeling? Like a man who's about to give a 40-year retrospective, I said. She almost smiled. Walter, they don't know you're behind this. They still think tonight is a standard celebration. I know. She invited press, Ruth said. Good, I said. Let them stay. The ballroom filled over the next 30 minutes. I stood near the entrance and watched them arrive. Clients I recognized. City officials my son had cultivated. Investors who I knew were considering putting capital into the firm. My daughter-in-law moved through the room like a woman who owned it. She wore a cobalt blue dress and her hair up, and she greeted every person with the ease of someone who had already calculated how this evening would end. She shook hands. She laughed at the right moments. She touched my son's arm twice in ways that looked affectionate and were, I now understood, the gestures of a woman performing a role she was about to walk away from. My son found me near the bar. He looked tired underneath the good suit. He had lost weight in the past year, and there were lines around his eyes that had not been there 3 years ago. He clapped me on the shoulder and said he was glad I was there, and he meant it. That much I was certain of. Whatever else had gone wrong between us, he still wanted his father in the room. I looked at him for a moment, at my wife's eyes in his face, at the way he carried his shoulders, the way I carried mine, at the man I had watched grow from a boy who used to sit on the floor of my drafting room and build towers out of pencils. I'm glad to be here, I said. And I meant that too. We were seated for dinner at 7:30. The food was good. The speeches from the firm's partners were gracious. My daughter-in-law sat across the round table from me, effortlessly social, her eyes moving around the room with the practiced efficiency of someone taking inventory. She caught my eye once and gave me a pleasant nod, the nod of a woman who believed she had already won. I nodded back. At 8:45, the event coordinator caught my eye from across the room. I gave her a small nod. She turned to the AV technician at the back. The lights in the ballroom dimmed slightly. A screen descended at the front of the room. My son looked up, surprised, then looked at me. I gave him a small smile. The first slide appeared, a photograph from 1984. A young man at a drafting table in a narrow office, bent over blueprints under a single desk lamp, half-empty coffee cups on every surface. I was 30 years old in that photograph, and I looked hungry in the way that you can only look when you have something to prove. There was a murmur of warmth in the room. A few people at neighboring tables leaned in. The slides moved forward through the decades. The first major contract, the library in Naperville, the Veterans Memorial, the hospital in Evanston. 40 years of work compressed into 4 minutes. I watched my son's face as the images moved across the screen. He looked moved. He looked proud. He reached over and touched my forearm. Then the slides changed. The image on the screen was a document, a financial document, wire transfer records. The room went still. My voice came through the ballroom speakers, recorded the day before in Ruth's office, calm and clear. On February 14th of this year, $240,000 was transferred from my personal investment account. I did not authorize this transfer. The authorization used a power of attorney document that I never signed. My daughter-in-law went rigid. She looked at the screen. She looked at me. The color left her face so completely, so suddenly, that the woman at the next table actually leaned over and asked if she was all right. This is the first of 3 transfers. The combined total is $680,000. Every transfer was authorized using a document that bore my signature, a signature I did not write. My son was staring at the screen, then at me, then at his wife. He looked like a man, trying to read 3 books at once. My daughter-in-law found her voice. "Walter," she said, her tone sharp and hushed. "This is not the place." On the screen, my voice continued from the speakers. "You will now see the forensic analysis of the signature on the power of attorney document. The analyst is Dr. Patricia Keene, certified by the American Board of Forensic Document Examiners." The next slide was a side-by-side comparison. On the left, my actual signature from a tax document, clearly dated and authenticated. On the right, the signature on the forged power of attorney. The differences were annotated in red. 6 specific points of divergence. The curve on the R, the pressure differential, the angle of approach on the capital M. "Turn it off," my daughter-in-law said. Her voice had changed. The socialite composure was dissolving fast, like a paper facade in rain. "Walter, turn this off right now, or I swear to God." "Garrett Finch," my recorded voice said, "purchased 2 one-way tickets to Lisbon, Portugal, departing O'Hare International Airport on November 21st. One ticket was purchased in his name. The second was purchased in the name of my daughter-in-law." The room was absolutely silent. My son turned to look at his wife. "I have seen buildings fail. I have been called to sites where the structure has begun to give way. And the terrible thing about it is not the noise, it is the silence just before. That moment of perfect suspension between the weight bearing down and the support giving out. My son's face was that silence. "Rachel," he said. His voice had no accusation in it yet. It was still the voice of a man hoping for a misunderstanding. She did not answer him. She was staring at the screen, calculating. Then she pushed back her chair and stood up. "This is fabricated," she said, addressing the room directly, her voice recovering its polish. "My father-in-law is elderly and has been experiencing cognitive difficulties. He misunderstands financial arrangements that his own attorneys set up. This presentation was put together by a bitter old man who can't accept that he is no longer in control of the firm he founded. Mrs. Mercer." The voice came from table 7. The federal prosecutor stood up. He was a compact man, with no wasted movements. And when he spoke, every person in the room turned to look at him with the automatic deference that authority commands. "I'm Assistant U.S. Attorney Marcus Webb," he said, "and I'm afraid you're going to want to sit back down." She did not sit. She took a step toward the exit. 3 things happened in rapid succession, so quickly that several people at nearby tables told me afterward they weren't sure what order they occurred in. Special Agent Donahue appeared at my daughter-in-law's left. A second agent appeared at her right. And from the speakers, clear and unmistakable, and completely free of any ambient noise, because it had been recorded in a very good restaurant, with very good acoustics, came her own voice. He has no idea. Garrett. The gala is perfect cover. By the time anyone looks at the accounts, we'll already be over the Atlantic. And then a man's voice. What about your husband? A pause. Then. He'll figure it out eventually. He's better off without me anyway. And honestly, he's been too weak to run that firm from the beginning. He just doesn't know it yet. And then, and the old man? Her laugh. That laugh. The same one from my study. The one that ended my last hope that I was wrong about her. Walter is 70 years old and can't find his reading glasses half the time. By the time he understands what happened, we'll have a house in Cascais. My son made a sound I had never heard him make before. Not grief exactly. Not rage. Something that did not have a clean name. The sound of a man hearing the truth about a life he had been living without knowing it. Special Agent Donahue said, very professionally, "Ma'am, I need you to come with me." She turned and looked at me one final time. Whatever she had planned, to say whatever last weapon she was loading, it didn't come. She looked at me, and in her eyes, I saw the calculation finally stop. The machine running the numbers go quiet. What was left was something smaller and colder, and I took no pleasure in it. "You set me up," she said. "No," I said. I set down my dessert fork. "I just finished what you started." She left between two federal agents, through a side door. Not the main entrance. The event coordinator, to her considerable credit, immediately went to the podium and suggested a brief intermission. Servers appeared with dessert. The room exhaled. My son was still seated. He had not moved during the last 4 minutes. He was staring at the tablecloth, and he was very, very still. I walked around the table and sat down in the chair she had vacated. We sat together quietly for a moment. Around us, conversations were resuming in careful, lowered voices. The press, 2 of them, were very busily pretending to check their phones. "Did you know?" I asked. My voice was even. He looked up. His eyes were wet, but not overflowing. "Not about the accounts," he said. "Not about Finch." I knew something was wrong. I knew she was. He stopped. I didn't ask questions I didn't want answers to. "And I knew you were being." He stopped again. "I let it happen, Dad. I let her push you out. I told myself it was complicated, that it was for the firm." He put his head in his hands. I did not tell him it was all right. It was not all right. And saying so would have been the kind of comfort that helps no one. I sat with him in the complicated truth of it. "The firm has $3.2 million in debt," I said. "I know. Ruth has a restructuring plan. It's workable. The underlying contracts are solid." I paused. "You did not build badly. You built on a bad foundation. Those are different problems with different solutions." He looked at me. "I don't know if you can forgive me," he said. "I don't know either," I said honestly. "But I know you're going to have to earn the answer. Not from me. From yourself." He nodded slowly. "Your daughter," I said, "knew before either of us acted. She brought me a drawing." He closed his eyes. "She's 9 years old," he said, his voice breaking on the last word. "She has your stubbornness," I said. "She'll be fine." I stood up. My knees ached, as they had for 20 years, as they would, for whatever time I had left. I straightened my jacket. I looked around the ballroom at the 40-year retrospective still frozen on the final slide, a photograph of the Veterans Memorial at dusk, the stone catching the last light, and I felt something settle in my chest. Not triumph. Not relief exactly. The specific quiet of a structure that has been tested and held. Marcus Webb appeared at my elbow. "Mr. Mercer," he said, "we'll need a formal statement tomorrow. Ruth can be present." He glanced toward the side door. "The forensics were clean. This will move quickly." "Good," I said. How quickly? 6 to 8 months to trial, assuming she doesn't deal. He paused. The co-conspirator was picked up at O'Hare 2 hours ago. He dealt within 30 minutes. Of course he did. Thank you, Marcus, I said. He nodded and moved away. I went to find my granddaughter. She was not at the gala, she was home with the sitter, 10 miles away. And it was past her bedtime, but I stepped outside the Palmer house into the cold Chicago night and called her anyway. She answered on the third ring, groggy and annoyed. Grandpa, it's late. I know, I said. I just wanted to tell you something. A pause. Then, more awake. What happened? The slideshow worked, I said. A beat of silence. Then, did she cry? No, I said. She laughed. Right up until she didn't. Another pause. I could hear her thinking. Is she gone? She asked. She's gone, I said. I heard her exhale a small, childlike breath of relief that reminded me of the sound a building makes when the last rivet sets and the load finally distributes the way it was designed to. Good, she said. Can we do Saturdays again? Starting this week, I said. The restructuring took 14 months. Ruth managed it with the precision and the complete absence of sentimentality that had made her the best attorney I had ever worked with. We renegotiated the bank debt, brought in a new CFO with actual credentials, and rebuilt the client list from the contracts that had survived undamaged. It was hard work. It was the right kind of hard. My son went through a period I am not going to describe in detail, because it was his period, not mine. And some reckonings are private. What I will tell you is that he showed up at my door 6 weeks after the gala at 7 a.m, in work clothes, and asked if I needed anything done around the house. He stayed until 4 p.m. He came back the following Saturday. He kept coming back. We haven't said everything that needs to be said yet. We probably won't for a long time. But he shows up. And in my experience, showing up is how you prove what the speeches can't. My daughter-in-law was convicted on 3 counts of wire fraud, 2 counts of aggravated identity theft, and 1 count of conspiracy. Federal sentencing guidelines are not interested in good intentions or extenuating circumstances. The judge read through the transcript of her recorded conversation with Garrett Finch, listened to her attorney's argument that the recording had been obtained without her knowledge, heard the prosecutor's response that a restaurant table in a public establishment carries no expectation of privacy, and sentenced her to 7 years. She did not look at me when they read the sentence. She looked at the wall behind the judge and kept her face very still. I sat in the gallery. I did not feel satisfied. I felt the way you feel when a long, difficult project is finally complete, exhausted, relieved, and already thinking about what comes next. What comes next, for me, is this: Saturday mornings. My granddaughter and I are back on schedule, and she has started asking questions about load-bearing calculations that I have to think carefully before answering. We are building a new model together, not a house this time, but a bridge. She wants to understand how something can span a gap that seems too wide to cross. I told her the answer was simple, even when the execution wasn't. You find the fixed points on both sides. You trust your materials. You calculate the load honestly, without wishful thinking. And you build to hold the real weight, not the weight you wish were there. She wrote that down. I am still getting up at 5 a.m. Old habits, old bones. I make coffee in the industrial machine I installed in this kitchen in 1997. And I stand at the window and look at the garden. And sometimes, when the light is right and the yard is still, I think I can see my wife out there, the way she used to stand in the early morning before anyone else was awake. Her coffee cup in both hands, looking at the thing we had built together and deciding it was good. I believe she would have found the slideshow very satisfying. If this story meant something to you, if you have ever been underestimated by the people you sacrificed for, or if you have ever had to protect what you built from the people closest to you, please hit the like button and subscribe to Revenge Chronicles. Tell me your story in the comments. I read every one. And remember this: your patience is not weakness. Your silence is not surrender. The most dangerous thing in any room is not the person making the most noise. It is the one in the corner who has already finished building the case. Thank you for watching.